Hi there, Jeremy O'Carroll, Director of the Fitzroy Learning Centres here. In today's video, what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about how many hours your child should be studying per week. It's a question that I'm often asked, and I think it'll be very helpful just to go through some of the issues surrounding that question. Now, of course, before we can come up with a very precise answer, I have to say that there are a few variables. For instance, while it's obvious that the more hours, the better as far as learning to read and write, there are different factors like, for instance, class size. So if you're in a large class, maybe in a school situation where you've got 30 children, then on average you're going to be learning less effectively than if you're in a smaller class size, perhaps 10 or fewer still. And so how many hours you need to study will be depend a little bit on the actual learning environment. But as a general rule, we can say that if, in particular with enrichment classes, you're studying about 1 to 2 hours per week, then you're going to get quite a bit out of it, ideally 1.5 to 2 hours. The key, though, to get real success is that you have at least 2 separate sessions. So you're much better off having sessions twice a week as opposed to one extra long session. It's just the way memory works. Memory, if we have a refresher, if we can have a chance to recap what we've done previously in a week, then we tend to hold on to it a lot longer. So it tends to get fixed in long-term memory. Whereas if we just go over something once, even if for a longer period of time, then it very often happens that by next week a good chunk of what we learnt is actually forgotten. So actually on this note, if you're learning at home or if you have the opportunity to perhaps send your child more regularly to enrichment classes, then the more the better. If you can, if your child can attend 3 to 5 sessions a week, for instance, then they make astronomical progress. So really, the more the better, but the key is not always so much the hours, but rather the amount of times per week that your child is learning. And you know, a few reasons, in addition to ones I've already mentioned, why this is so, is just that the brain is a little bit like a sponge. And so it can absorb so much new information in any given hit, but after that it kind of becomes saturated and becomes difficult to absorb more information. And that's why learning for 2 straight hours isn't a really good idea. Whereas if you can learn for 3/4 an hour, or a shorter session and do it twice, then your brain has a chance kind of to ring itself, and then it will be receptive to more information. So that, in addition to just the reinforcement of a particular thing, means that your memory recall will be far greater. Now, it's not just, of course, a question of time or even frequency. There are a few other little factors which I'd like to mention, which I think will help you get the most out of your child and his or her learning potential. And some of these are fairly basic, but often they're overlooked. Now, one key ingredient to a child being receptive to learning is that they get enough sleep. If your child hasn't had enough sleep, then obviously they will struggle to remember things, stay focused, and learn well in class. Another more common issue, though, is one of diet. And a lot of people don't really think about this, but if your child's eating foods that have a very high, what's termed glycemic index, that is, the glycemic index really explains how quickly the sugar in foods breaks down into the bloodstream. And so if they break down very quickly, then the food is said to have a high glycemic index. And what tends to happen there is you get a spike of energy, but after the spike comes the fall, and you tend to get very sleepy. So if you eat things which are high in sugar, you'll go up and you crash. And a lot of foods, though, which we eat, which aren't actually sweet, sugary foods, also have a high glycemic index. For instance, white rice. If you eat a large bowl of white rice, then it almost always happens that a bit after that, maybe an hour or so after you eat that bowl, or perhaps even sooner, depending on the person, you tend to grow very sleepy and your mind sluggish. The same thing can happen with white flour. Same effect. Or with a lot of breakfast cereals today, you'll note that if you look at the ingredients and nutritional content of different breakfast cereals, they often are very high in sugar, which means, again, they're very sugary, the glycemic index is high, so children eat those, they get a rush of energy in the morning, but then when they get to school and are sitting in class, they're on the downside of that sugar rush and they go sleepy and lethargic, and it becomes very hard for them to concentrate. You know, with this idea of glycemic index, you can really just go back to your own personal experience. You know, I challenge you to eat a big bowl of white rice and then do a taxing intellectual task afterwards. I think you'll find that you'll be very sleepy and sluggish. So if you want to make sure that your child can optimize his or her learning, then I recommend a few things. Firstly, make sure that they get 1.5, hopefully to 2 hours of learning per week. Next, make sure that they have more than one session. Give them 2, 3, the more the better, because the more sessions they have, the more what they learn will be reinforced in their mind and the greater their memory recall will be. And finally, make sure that your child has enough sleep and has a diet which has a low glycemic index. So things with complex carbohydrates, whole grains, whole wheats, these sorts of things, natural foods, tend to produce the mental state needed for great learning. So just focus on these issues and I'm sure your child will learn a lot more effectively. So look, hope this video has been useful to you. If you'd like more information on phonics, on the Fitzroy method or the Fitzroy Learning Centres, then I recommend you just take note of the address we're going to give at the end of this video. That will be a link which will send you to the Fitzroy method online video portal. And once you're there, you're going to have access to lots of free informational videos on phonics, Fitzroy Method and Fitzroy Learning Centre. If you're already at the Fitzroy phonics video portal, then what I recommend is simply look to the top of the screen. You'll see there are different tabs and different sections. Click around and again, you'll find lots of information on these topics. So hope this video has been useful and I look forward to hearing from you sometime in the future. Thank you.